we're studying Genesis on Sunday nights, aren't we? And in a change, as I said, to the advertised schedule, I've actually decided to tackle Genesis 34 and 35. And the events that happen in this chapter are severe, aren't they? Difficult issues, emotive issues. So we need to deal with them honestly and yet sensitively. This is a true story with real people, real emotions. These are real events. So what we're doing, we're going to look mainly at Genesis 34, which we're calling the Brothers Grimm, and then we'll see God's response to this horrific story in Genesis 35. So, chapter 34 happens in 3 distinct acts. So let's pretend it's a movie or a play. There are the 3 acts. And in each act, we see things from 2 different sides. The narrator focuses on each faction, basically, each party. So it's kind of split out like this. You've got scene 1 from Shechem's point of view, and then we get Jacob's point of view. See, act 2, you get Shechem's point of view, Jacob's point of view. Act 3, Shechem and Jacob. That's the pattern. So we've got 3 acts tonight, and I'll add comments and applications as we go. But first up, any good book, good movie needs a prologue, doesn't it? So what's the prologue? We'll look back at chapter 33 for a second. Chapter 33, verse 18. Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way from Paddan Aram, and he camped before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the piece of land on which he pitched his tent. There he erected an altar and called it El Elohe Israel, which means God, the God of Israel. So on first reading, this doesn't look that concerning, does it? But the author has left us a big clue that something isn't quite right. I wonder, did anyone spot it? It's that phrase in verse 18, he camped before the city. Or as we've seen it elsewhere in Genesis, he pitched his tent towards the city. Who's got a good memory? Who else pitched their tent before the city? Lot, yeah. Lot pitched his tent towards Sodom, didn't he? And as we hear those words then, we're instantly reminded that we should instantly be thinking about Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. We need to be thinking about Genesis 19. Because when we think about Genesis 19, we think about this, there are obvious parallels. Okay, so Jacob has set up camp. He's just outside the city of Shechem. It's when he opens the doors, that's what he sees. Worse, perhaps, he's actually bought a piece of land to live on outside of Shechem. When Abraham bought land, it was to be buried in. But Jacob here deviates from the pattern of his forefathers. And it's worth reminding ourselves at this point, when we think of cities in the Old Testament, we're not thinking of places like London or New York, all right? We're not thinking of places where millions of people live. We're not even thinking of smaller cities like Norwich or Colchester. Shechem would have been a fortified settlement, so an enclosure with big walls where people could live safely. So people would work out in the fields all day, and then at night they would safely come into the city walls. It's the way castles operated in medieval Europe. So this is a small place, not huge. So we've got 2 ways of life, right, side by side. We've got Jacob, who's a nomad, he lives in tents. He's vulnerable, he's relying on God for protection. And we've got the Canaanites, who are relying on the strength of their city walls, their castle walls. So do you see the contrast? Act 1 then, that's the prologue. Act 1, as we get into Genesis 34, can be summed up with one word. We're going to call it defilement. And scene 1, we're looking at Shechem. We're going to call Shechem's shame. So verse 1, now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land. Notice the way the narrator reminds us who Dinah is. She's the daughter of Jacob's second favourite wife. She's Leah's daughter. Dinah is the youngest of the 12 children. And at this point, she's probably around 15 years old. And what the teenagers like to do? Well, they like hanging around with other teenagers, don't they? They like amusing themselves at parties and functions. So Dinah starts hanging around with the Canaanite girls, the women of the land. And Dinah is not a peasant, right? This is important. She's the daughter of a very rich, very powerful local businessman. She's an it girl. She would have looked very rich, very well off. She would have had servants attending her. And so she's quickly invited into the inner circle of the city's elite, the ruling class. She's invited to the posh parties. She picks up the fashions of the city. She starts using the slang terms of the Shechemites. She's like Lot's daughter a bit, isn't she? They're his daughters. She'd been brought up near the city, and now she starts to go into the city and act like the city. She's dancing with the city. But unfortunately, she hasn't understood the types of characters who live in this city. And as a young woman, perhaps she hasn't quite understood how wicked men can be. Because shortly after she's been introduced to the Shechemites, into the city, something terrible happens. Look at verse 2. When Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her and lay with her and humiliated her. This is a nightmare, isn't it? The prince of the land, the second most powerful man in the region, rapes Jacob's daughter. So suddenly the stakes, the tension is raised. And Shechem takes Dinah hostage. He won't let her go. She's a guest in his palace. And the longer she's there, well, the more infatuated he becomes with her. He begins to talk tenderly to her. So he begins to downplay the sexual assault. He gaslights her. Look, also, you didn't really try that hard to stop me, did you? And then he tries to woo her. Perhaps in an attempt to stay alive, Dinah has to appease the prince. So she engages with him. She talks to him. She has to laugh at his jokes. But all the time, she's repulsed. There's terrible things happen to her. Verse 4, Shechem spoke to his father, the king, the warlord Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl for my wife." Not a great start to a relationship, is it? Well, scene 2, Shechem's shame reveals that Jacob is lame. Look at verse 5. Now Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his livestock in the field. So Jacob held his peace until they came. Jacob doesn't cover himself with glory here, does he? Who does he see as Dinah's protector? Who's responsible for Dinah? Well, it's not me. I mean, she's Leah's daughter, isn't she? When I thought Esau was going to kill us, last chapter, I stuck her nearer the danger. She's expendable, is Dinah. So I'll let her brothers sort out this mess. They should have warned her not to go in the city. She's brought this on herself. Again, he reminds us of Lot, doesn't he? Lot was willing to throw his daughters out so that the men of Sodom could abuse them. Why? Well, because Lot was making money off of the Sodomites. Lot didn't want to rock the boat. He didn't want to cause a political scene. And I think Jacob's the same. He's got a convenient little life now outside of Shechem. There's no threat from Esau. Business is booming. So can't we all just get along? Well, in verse 6 and 7 in particular, we see the right response, don't we? Verse 6, Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. So Hamor, the warlord, the king, comes out to barter for Dinah. But he's not alone. In fact, we find out in verse 11 that Shechem, the rapist, has come along too. Verse 7, the sons of Jacob had come in from the field as soon as they heard of it. And the men were indignant and very angry. because he had done an outrageous thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing must not be done. The narrator is very much on the side of Dinah and her older brothers, isn't he? What has done has been an absolute outrage, a terrible sin. And the brothers must think, what, now this guy's just going to waltz in like it's a business deal? And Dad, Jacob, is welcoming them. He's sat them down. He's giving them a cup of tea. This is terrible. Act 2, we can sum up with the word, where is it? Deception, starting in verse 8. Deception in Act 2, scene 1, where again, from Shechem's point of view, name your price, name a price. So let's set the scene. We're outside Jacob's tent now. On one side, we've got Hamor and Shechem, and across the table, we've got Dinah's brothers, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. We're not sure if Jacob's there or not. We're not told. But even if he is, he doesn't speak. He's mute. And in scene 1, the camera is focused then on Hamor and Shechem. And we get their opening pitch regarding Dinah. So I'll just read it. And I want you, as I read it, I want you to think, and then you're going to tell me, what is missing from this little speech. Verse 8, but Hamor spoke with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him to be his wife. Make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall dwell with us and the land shall be open to you. Dwell and trade in it and get property in it. So he says this could be the start of a wonderful new era. A merger between two great peoples. And financially and politically this all makes sense. Verse 11, Shechem also said to her father, to Jacob and to her brothers, let me find favour in your eyes, and whatever you say to me I will give. Ask me for as great a bride price and gift as you will, and I will give whatever you say to me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife. Question, what's missing? Yeah, an apology. There's no sorry, he said, there's no appeal for mercy. There's no repentance. You would imagine you'd tell him, my lords, I'm so sorry about what my son has done. Forgive us, please. But there's none of that. There's no acknowledgement of Dinah's humanity. They're treating her as if she was a stolen horse. And she's still their hostage. They haven't brought her along with her. And look at the very last line of this chapter. Should he treat our sister like a prostitute? Should we treat her like a prostitute? Like she's a slab of meat, only good for one thing. And in fact, Hamor and Shechem want the brothers to treat her like that. You can make profit from her good looks. You can make a quick buck. You can make political capital out of her. Well, in treating Dinah like this, Hamor and Shechem sign their own death warrants, don't they? Well, sadly, in our own day and age, our society has brainwashed young women into seeing themselves like these men see Dinah. There's a website now, a platform, where individual women will sell access to their bodies to paying subscribers. I won't do this website with dignity of naming it. But, get this, I couldn't believe this. 1 in 10 18 to 24-year-olds in the United States are on this platform. Think about that. 10% of young women in America have stripped off for money. They've sold their innocence, sold their purity for a couple of $100. The only value they see in themselves is their sexual value. And it's very sad, isn't it? This is what happens when you teach young women that sex is nothing more than pleasure. And that sex outside of marriage is to be encouraged and celebrated. Our society's bleached all the meaning out of sex, hasn't it? And it's turned it into a commodity. Pray for our young people, this is what they're up against. Okay, we've heard Shechem's offer. The camera pans round now to look at 4 stern young men. Young men who've got a plan. They're going to deceive these two savages in verse 13. They answered Shechem and his father Hamor deceitfully, because he defiled their sister Dinah. Jacob's taken the back seat, but actually Jacob is very much in the room, isn't he? Like father, like sons. The deceiver's sons are going to deceive. And of course, we'll see in chapter 37 that they're going to take it up a notch. They're eventually going to deceive their own dads. So, scene 2, a religious slice. That's the price. Quite simply, if the two tribes are going to merge, you've got to get with our religious customs, the brothers say. And sorry, gents, but that means something quite painful. A little bit of self-mutilation. You've got to do a bit of DIY surgery. If you all get circumcised, then the deal is on. Verse 17, but if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone. And understand there's a threat in verse 17. Basically they're saying we will come and get our sister back by force. And I suppose you've got to love the irony, haven't you? The way you've hurt our sister is the very means by which we're going to hurt you. You abused her with that bit of your body, so now we're going to take a bit of that bit of your body. Well, will Hamor and his son take the bait? Well, Act 3 I've called dissection. And scene 1 we're calling self-surgery. Strangely, Hamor and Shechem are keen to get the knife out. They couldn't be happier. Verse 18, their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem. And the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. Some men like looking hard, don't they? They'll do stunts, they'll have things smashed over their heads for fun. They'll do feats of endurance. They'll get very painful tattoos. Why? Well, because I'm off, don't I? Look good in front of the boys. And I can only imagine that that's the sort of fervour that grips this little city. Hamor and Shechem hang around at the gate of the city. So this is where all the business deals are done. And every man who comes out to work is met by the chief, by the king of the city, and his son. And I say, you want us to do what? And cut what off? But look, I say, look, this is going to be a show of cultural unity, isn't it? And we can take advantage of these simple shepherds. Let us take their daughters as our wives, and let us give them our daughters. Look, some of the women over there are beautiful, they're well good looking. You can have some of their girls if you do this. You'll be able to marry them. Verse 23, will not their livestock, their property, and all their beasts be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they can dwell with us. Come on, lads, it's only a tiny slice of skin. Let's do this, we'll be rich. Verse 24, all who went out of the gate of his city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every man was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city. Okay, final scene. Aggravated burglary. Now, in an attempt to make things rhyme, I've somewhat downplayed what happens in the final scene, haven't I? This is nothing short of a massacre. And I'm not going to downplay the severity of what happens. Simon and Levi, and we have to presume some of their men, so maybe a gang of maybe 30, they walk into the city. And no one stops them because, well, they're allies now. In fact, they've been in and out of the city for the last couple of days. Smiling, shaking hands, getting to know people, buying and selling goods. But now, this time, they walk in with weapons. And no one can stop them because every fighting man is clutching his groin in agony. Or to deal with the pain, they've drunk so much that they've passed out. Simeon and Levi walk into the palace and they kill every man and teenage boy they come across. Everyone who's been circumcised. Anyone who sought to profit from their sister's defilement. They find Hamor, and you've got to imagine they slice him open. I imagine when they find Shechem, they probably make him suffer a bit, maybe there's a bit of torture involved, and then eventually they kill him. They get Dinah, they free her, they rescue her, and they leave the city. And as we follow them out of the city, Well, behind them we see their men executing every fighting male they can get their hands on. There's screaming, there's blood, there's death. It's horrific. And as Simeon, Levi and Dinah leave, coming the other way are the rest of Jacob's sons and their men. And they join in the killing. And they completely sack the city of Shechem. They take the women, the children, they take the animals, they go in the fields, they nip all their stuff. They get the spoils of war. And of course, to us, this sounds horrendous, doesn't it? As 21st century Londoners, this is alien to us. Because we know nothing but peace for 80 years now. And we've got the Geneva Convention, and we're in general educated, civilised people. But we have to understand, when we read the Old Testament, and I've said this before, when we read the Old Testament, we have to appreciate that we are peering into an alien culture. We're not dealing with sophisticated, civilised individuals here. We're not dealing with modern, westernised people. If you got in a time machine and you travelled back to Jacob's camp and you stayed there for a couple of days, they would terrify you. You would not like them. You wouldn't like the goodies in the Bible. We wouldn't like the way they spoke to each other. We wouldn't like the fact that they owned slaves. We wouldn't like the way they treated their women, or their animals, or their children. Lose the Sunday school picture of the Bible you've created in your heads. That maybe the Old Testament characters were just like us. Good middle-class guys, you know, who would visit Auntie F on a Sunday and share a biscuit with her. They weren't. They were savage, flawed, bloodthirsty men. Men that we would run a mile from. Men whose first instinct was violence. They weren't wearing Be Kind t-shirts. This is an alien culture. That's why the chapters like this are so shocking. And actually, that's why it's very unhelpful when all people do to this chapter is try and boil down who's right and who's wrong. That's what so many preachers do. They say, well, you know, we should forgive warlords when they sexually assault our family members. Well, it doesn't work, does it? That's not an application. In fact, Jacob's response to what happens is interesting. He doesn't morally condemn his sons, does he? He's simply worried about the geopolitical implications that this massacre has brought. Look at verse 30. Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You've brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land. The Canaanites and the Perizzites, my numbers are few. And if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." But they said, "Should he treat our sister like a prostitute?" All right, we've got a brutal, violent and candid passage, haven't we? If the point is not a moral one, though, what are we supposed to learn from this episode? Why has Moses included this in Genesis? He could have left it out, couldn't he? Well, that last line, that last verse, it really lands, doesn't it? Simeon and Levi's response should cut Jacob deep. Should he treat our sister like a prostitute? Actually, what they're saying to their father is that you allowed Dinah to be treated like a prostitute. You held your peace. You compromised. And you compromised, why, Jacob? Well, because you didn't really care. You didn't care enough. You didn't love your daughter anywhere near enough. I mean, it's only Dinah, it's only Leah's daughter. She's not that important. You failed to lead, and now look what's happened. I think that's the point of this passage. I think it reveals what a flawed character Jacob still is. A couple of weeks back we saw him wrestling with God, didn't we? He received the blessing. He is God's chosen man. He is Israel. But we see here that he's no better than Adam or Lot. So think about Adam. Another question for you. Where was Adam when Eve was being tempted by the serpent. Where was he? Right next to her. Right next to her. He's standing next to her as the serpent's trying to con her. He was there, but he's failing to take control of the situation. He was a coward. And where was Lot in Genesis 19? Well, again, he's trying to appease the Sodomites. He hasn't made the tough decisions. He should have left Sodom ages ago. He didn't love his daughters enough in that story either, did he? And as a result, things spiralled out of control, and a whole city in Sodom and Gomorrah was burnt to the ground, and here a whole city is burnt to the ground. When God's people fail to stand up and be counted, when Christian men shirk their responsibilities, well, it doesn't end well. Jacob here has been exposed. The question then as we close is, what is God going to do about it? What's God going to do now? We've got the horror of chapter 34. We've got a family of rotten people. The patriarch is a coward. The sons are bloodthirsty vigilantes. What would you expect God to do? What did God do to Adam? Well, he exiled him, didn't he? He threw him out of the Garden of Eden. He sentenced him to death. And what did he do to Lot? Well, again, Lot was exiled. He was disgraced. He was thrown out of the promised land. His descendants, the Moabites, end up east of Jordan, east of Eden, east of the promised land. In Jacob, we've got Adam and Lot rolled into one. So we should come to chapter 35 with a sense of fear of what's going to happen now to Jacob. Is God done with him? Well, let's look at Genesis 35, verse 1 to 15. Is God done with Jacob? God said to Jacob, verse 1, "Arise, get up." What are you doing? Why have you pitched your tent next to Shechem? Go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. Yahweh reminds Jacob of their relationship. In fact, God isn't mentioned in Genesis 34, and that's because Jacob isn't thinking about him. Jacob's forgotten him. When our lives are going well, it's often God who loses out, isn't it? God takes a back seat. We don't thank God, we forget him when things go well. Verse 2, so Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, and purify yourselves and change your garments." Jacob's clan, Jacob's family have become worldly because he's drifted into worldliness. So now he calls them to repent. Get rid of the foreign gods. Clean yourselves, purify yourselves from the world. Verse 3, then let us arise and go up to Bethel so that I may make there an altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods that they had and the rings that were in their ears. Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree that was near Shechem. Why Jacob doesn't destroy them and melt them down, we don't know, but nevertheless he just dumps them. Yahweh will not share a platform with these other gods. He shall have no other gods before him. Verse 5, as they journeyed, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. It would have made sense from a military point of view for all the surrounding towns and villages to wipe Jacob and his boys out, wouldn't it? After all, if they can annihilate the town of the city of Shechem, what's stopping them from annihilating all the other cities? But God makes sure that that doesn't happen. Great fear, great terror falls on all the local warlords. They dare not go out and attack Jacob and his sons. Verse 6, Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. And there he built an altar and called the place El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried under an oak below Bethel, so he called its name Alon Bakuth. God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall you be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name." So he called his name Israel. And God said to him, "I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you." Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him, and Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone. He poured out a drink offering on it and poured oil on it. So Jacob called the name of the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. Do you see the big difference with Jacob compared to Adam and Lot? Jacob is shown mercy, isn't he? God won't desert him because of his sin. He won't destroy his offspring because of their sin. And the reason is because God has made a covenant with Jacob. A unilateral covenant. It doesn't matter how many times Jacob messes up. It doesn't matter how flawed his personality is. And we'll see in future weeks, it's only going to get worse. But it doesn't matter. God is determined to bless him no matter the cost. And the reason why does chapter 35 happen after 34? Well, it's because God's determined to bless us through Jesus. Look what God says to him: "Kings shall come from your body." It's through this mess of a family that one day a king would arrive who would do everything God had asked of him. He would do what his ancestors Adam and Lot and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Judah and David and all previous kings had failed to do. This king would be totally obedient to Yahweh. Despite chapter 34 and because of chapter 35, King Jesus will arrive in Israel. He is the king who is God. In fact, did you spot that weird thing in verse 13? God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him. The Lord has appeared to Jacob in physical form again. This is what we call a theophany. It's when God takes on human shape. He appears as a man. Remember, we saw, didn't we, months ago now, Bethel is the gate of heaven. It's where heaven and earth coexist. It's heaven's front door. So Yahweh steps out of heaven and onto earth. He stepped out of his front door and he's looking at his front yard. He's come to meet Jacob. And you can imagine the Lord shaking his head, can't you, when he sees Jacob. What a mess you've gotten yourself into. But don't worry, he says, "I'm not going to leave you. I'm not going to forsake you." God is determined to bless Jacob because he's determined to bless us through Jesus, the King. The King who would obediently go to the cross. The man who is God, the man who is Bethel, the man who is Israel personified. He's the man Jacob should be. That man, Jesus, dies so that all of his brothers and sisters can be redeemed. So that a new and better covenant can be established. And so that we can be saved no matter how many times we mess up. No matter how flawed our personality is. God is determined to save. Let's pray.